What's coming for you and for the wider world in January 2024, the first month of what promises to be a very interesting year. Recently, we put out what was, for this channel, a long forecast episode on the astrology of 2024, which is still going strong on this channel, but making that long video didn't leave us with enough time to put together another edited forecast video for the month of January in particular. So we decided to do something a little bit different. SJ kindly invited Steph and me to his channel, and we went live on December the 29th to talk about the astrology of January. We had a great time talking about what promises to be a really good start to the year, at least for us all as individuals. We'll resume normal service on this channel for February, so expect an edited forecast for that month in the usual style in a few weeks' time. And please do give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying this free content. And do subscribe to SJ's channel too. He goes live like this all the time and fields questions from those of you who join the chat. And do consider booking a consultation with any of us. All of us are consulting astrologers available for bookings. I'm planning to take some time off consulting in early 2024 to focus on some creative projects. So if you want a slot, then get one while they're still available. Details are in the description below. But without further ado, we're now going to head into the recording of our January 2024 live forecast. Enjoy.
All right, so welcome to this forecast for the month of January 2024. I'm joined by Dan Waits and Steph Koyfman. Excuse me. This is SJ Anderson. Welcome here. We are happy to be presenting a forecast for this month of the year with you. We are doing this every month on World Astrology Report. So World Astrology Report, Dan's YouTube channel. You can check that out. I just wanted to start off here with some high-level ideas about the month ahead and some of the transits that we've extracted as the important ones. For me, this month is very creative, and I want to come back to that theme with this Jupiter-Saturn sextile. That's kind of my main theme of the month because these two planets are applying all month. Jupiter has a station direct, or will have station direct, on the 31st of January. And so now Jupiter and Saturn get to apply all month, and they will get as close to perfecting the sextile as they will by 6 February is when they get within, they're as close as they'll be. It's within a degree. But that's my defining energy of this month, of the creative powers that you might have access to as a kind of movement forward into 2024. Dan, any thoughts on high-level January 2024 astrology?
I really like this month as well for similar reasons. I think that Jupiter-Saturn sextile is pretty much, sort of the dominant signature, apart from, of course, the Pluto ingress a bit later in the month. But in terms of a way to start a new year, when we're sort of getting into Capricorn season and thinking about what are we gonna build this year, or what are we gonna create this year, I think there's a lot really supporting that kind of visioning and taking the first steps, laying bricks for kind of whatever we want to build and bring into existence this year. So I like it.
Wonderful, wonderful stuff.
Yeah, I feel like January has a very boots on the ground feel to it, right? Like the astrological calendar and the Gregorian calendar aren't always synced. You know what I mean? Like every year it's like this energy of like, set your resolutions, get to the gym, right? Like start on a good foot. And I feel like the astrology of January 2024 actually kind of supports that type of thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if the gyms are a little bit more crowded this month than a normal January. Yeah, I mean, it's very much like different than 2023 when we were starting the year with Mercury and Mars, both retrograde, right? This year we have Mercury stationing direct on January 1st. Jupiter is stationing direct. Mars goes into Capricorn right away. It's like, okay, we're not even wasting time. Just go, 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 right?
Yeah, I love that. I've been thinking about getting to the gym a little bit more recently. So I'm exhibit 1 for that astrological point stuff. That's cool. All right, so what we're going to do is just go in order here. We're going to start here on our first point with Mercury stationing direct. And, before we do that, we're going to come into a little bit of a review for December. We've become accustomed to doing these on our forecasts. And I'm going to just say my little bit here about the December review. My kind of striking thing that I was thinking about was this Saturn-Mars square, this mutable Saturn-Mars square that, though it perfected earlier, it was still operative by sign. And this new moon in Sagittarius was somewhat close to Mars and Saturn and Neptune. I mean, there was a lot of mutable square tension energy this month. Those malefic squares can be malefic. I mean, they can bring difficult, sad, war, fight, atrocity, all of these things. And so I'm thinking about the ongoing wars, war in the Middle East. I just saw before we started recording, there was some uptick on some Russian bombs in Kyiv, I think, over the last 24 hours. So this is still operative, the Mars-Saturn square. This is one of the things in January that will end. But it's kind of been defining our energy, hasn't it? Like Mars. It was like Mars in Libra with the South Node, then Mars powerful in Scorpio, and then Mars squaring Saturn. A lot of that end of 2023 has been quite martial and challenged. And I think we see it in the headlines. What's Gaza's death toll say about the war? BBC.com, and they have an article about it. New York Times, Arab nations condemned U.S. for vetoing ceasefire resolution. This is a story, I'm going to kick it back over to YouTube, but this is New York Times. Middle East powers skip U.S.-led naval effort to deter Houthi rebels. And so there's this whole thing with these Yemeni Houthi rebels right with that strait, with the body of water there blocking access. Steph, you mentioned this thing about Neptune direct. What is that? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I just kind of noticed that right around the time that Neptune stationed direct in December, I think Israel tried to flood the Hamas tunnels with seawater, right? There was this whole thing where they were literally just going to flood the tunnels, and people were saying something about how the salt water was going to damage the land and make it not arable anymore. And I just thought that imagery was very literal, especially like this whole time, right? Like they use that terminology of the flood, right? The Al-Aqsa flood, right? So it just feels very Saturn and Neptune getting closer and closer. And that's another thing I wanted to point out is that as they get closer, right, because they get to 10 degrees apart in 2024, they're going to start stationing direct and retrograde closer and closer together. So like that emphasis, I think, is going to be a lot stronger.
Yeah, I think just on that as well, one of the things that I think you mentioned in a previous video, Steph, is that Saturn has been in this first decan, this first 10 degrees of Pisces. And if you're familiar with Austin Coppock's work on the decans, this is a decan that he calls the labyrinth, and it's just unbelievably literal how much that theme, the theme of the tunnels of this literal labyrinth has been entirely a part of the story that we've sadly seen playing out over the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just put up here the solar fire. Everybody can see this is Saturn in Pisces right here. It's been hanging out here. It has not reached yet into that next decan. That will happen in 2024 at a certain point. But Saturn was stationing. It was in that 0 degree, I think at the beginning of December even. I know it was at the end of November. It started moving out of that 0 degree. But I think it was 7 December when Neptune stationed direct, or roughly around that time. 6-7 December, there it is, and that's even, they're already starting to match. I think that's a beautiful point, Steph. They're going to start stationing together, which means you get two major points of emphasis as they're together. God, that's going to be wild. I'm not going to pull up these dates in 2024. Check out our video where we talk about the exact dates where they're stationing retrograde. I think it's June, July. It's like May, June, July. They get really close and then they station together. In 2024. Okay, let's come back here. I'm gonna shift to the next slide. It's gonna take a second for this presentation. I guess it's gonna load here. But the other thing I thought about the month was Mercury's retrograde that we saw in December. And it was, I think it stationed retrograde the 13th, and then it moved from Capricorn back to Sagittarius, where it is now. But Twitter had a real notable crash. I know people say this at every Mercury retrograde. Oh, social media is down. Social media is down. But it was true. I mean, it was kind of down for like a few hours, and no one could see any tweets, and people were kind of freaked out about it a little bit. You saw these stories. Elon Musk's X suffered another global outage.
I must have missed that.
Yeah, I think
I saw it. I tried to log in and couldn't get on.
I'm an addict, Steph, an ex-addict, so I'm going to see it.
I mean, I am too.
Yeah, the whole world. Yeah. So anyhow, maybe this was less significant. It's just one that came to mind in my review. I think that's plenty. Anything else on your mind from December you want to share about? That's a kind of a review for you too.
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple of things. I mean, one of them was we pointed out in the forecast that we did for December, Pluto in the anaretic degree, the final degree of Capricorn, and what I thought was interesting is this situation that's developed with the Suez Canal, which we've already just mentioned, but the global trade network that relies on the security of the seas, essentially, it's kind of a cornerstone of the current world order. And we see Pluto right at the last degree of this sign that has to do with with the current order, the status quo, and suddenly we seem to see this order almost breaking down. Really, I mean it's huge, honestly. And so yes, you've got that stuff going on in Pisces, but I think there's this element of kind of Pluto sort of almost putting some finishing touches to this work that's being doing in Capricorn in a way that I mean I didn't quite see coming. It can always, astrology will always surprise you, and we did see the whole Epstein kind of business as well come up again.
I was going to say something about that, actually.
Yeah.
I don't want to derail you too much, Dan, but I was just thinking about how supposedly they're going to release that list in January. They are saying January 1st, but I was like, what about that Pluto Cazimi at 29 degrees of Capricorn? I'm wondering if releasing an Epstein list just seems very much fitting of that symbolism, right?
100%.
Yeah, January 19th. And I've always thought that Pluto and Capricorn, one of the major stories was the Epstein revelations. And it goes back to even Jimmy Savile. I know we're getting, not to get too Capricorn here, but it's a major theme of the month ahead is going to be these kind of darker energies. You think about the Devil card and the Tarot, it corresponds to Capricorn. And there really is some kind of darker underbelly that can be extracted with Capricorn. And so I think that's here's that Cazimi. It's around the 19th or 20th here. You'll get that Cazimi of Pluto right at the end of Capricorn.
That just looks wild.
With Mars.
It's gonna go from 29 degrees to 0 Aquarius, right? It's just.
And Mercury Mars is like the list, right? The list of the people that were out there, and how that will be kind of a Martial event in their world and a Mercurial event, releasing the information that's kind of an attack on an echelon of society. I still am skeptical that it's even going to be released. They've been saying it for so long that what gets released is too redacted or something like this. But
well, they're saying January 1st, which is when Mercury stations direct, but then we have that Pluto Cazimi later in the month. So I'm wondering, if that happens according to that timeline, could there be some sort of further dominoes that fall?
Yeah, it's a good question, an interesting thing to think about here for the month ahead. Okay, anything else from you, Steph, about December 2023 that you want to bring in here before we press on?
Not really, no.
Okay, perfect. Let's just move in then, and let's start here with the first point for the January forecast. This is Mercury stationing direct. When we were just talking about stuff you were just mentioning, we have it here UTC 307. Okay, and that puts it on the first in North America, or later in the second down under or in Asia. But basically, right to kick the year off right at the beginning here, we get the direct station of Mercury. What I've highlighted in this slide is simply the story here and how elongated it's been. Mercury came to Sagittarius in November, all the way back at 10 November. It entered Capricorn on 1 December. It's stationed retrograde on 13 December. It's stationing, it's re-entering Sagittarius on the 23rd of December. Here's the direct station that kicks off this year. So just looking at the history of this transit, we're really kind of throwing off some baggage, or it's like that the end of 2023, we kind of get movement ahead with these stories that may have been lingering on to finish out the year. And just note for everyone, it's 14 January, you get the reentry into Capricorn, and then it's 5 February when we're into some whole new territory for Mercury. And it really does the boundaries of this. It's kind of like the end of one year, the beginning of another. It's like a straddle transit in a certain way. I'm going to kick it to you two, and then I'll come back in with some of my other ideas here. But I just wanted to lay out that ephemeral structure for it. Any big thoughts from either of you here to kick us off? What are you thinking here?
I love this for the start of the new year. I found that that the Mercury retrograde quite messy. Some of you may have noticed that the 2024 forecast had to be taken down and then put up again the day afterwards, and that was the kind of culmination of a lot of like fiddly, sort of semi-nightmarish mercurial trickstery that went into making that video. But we've kind of got that messy stuff a little bit out the way now, and we go into this new year. We can start to kind of sort of integrate what we learned from some of those hitches that we might have run through at the end of the year. So I'm quite happy to see that.
Yeah, I think just the way that it's sort of going back and forth between Capricorn, where it's like relatively kind of like orderly and efficient and pragmatic, and into Sagittarius, where it's like the logic doesn't logic, right? It's just kind of like you kind of have to make a little bit of like a non-linear route, right? Like a leap, right? Like I feel like that's what Mercury and Sagittarius does. It's kind of like, I don't know how you got from here to there, but it's kind of interesting that you did that. What was I going to say about that? Oh, so it makes me think of that aphorism, like man plans, God laughs, right? So I feel like we spent like the first 3 weeks of December kind of trying to get our stuff in order, right? Like it's like, okay, all I have to do is like put one foot in front of the other. And then it was back into Sagittarius, and like the whole thing kind of falls apart. I don't know. It hasn't really been that bad for me personally, but I'm also not the one who's dealing with video editing software. So I think that, there can be a little bit of like well, you didn't plan for it to go that way, but like, what are you getting from it now that it did? And like, how does that actually help you create a more robust plan going forward?
Yeah, I think the same. I love Jupiter ruled Mercury's just for the unrestrained kind of vibe that they bring. The sort of exploration is a key word for Sagittarius. That's in any Astro 101 text. You're going to see adventure, exploration. Ninth house, you can see I've set this chart for 0 Aries as the house system. So we get that nice ABC, elegant configuration. Not that we're reading from ABC, but this is why a lot of people associate one reason why you get Sagittarius is exploration and adventure. Another one is it's just a Jupiterian signification, which is, you're going out to learn, learning, teaching, all of these things. I think it has to do also with the fire sign nature of Sagittarius, which is a so-called desect or outer world energy. And, that's all I would add here. I think of Sagittarius also so much as being about identity, and how sometimes to find ourselves, we really do need to explore. That's the only way to discover in a certain way, really the limits of who one is, or to like come into our powers fully, is to take risks and kind of maneuver outside of what we've been previously. So I think there's a great time, set up for that with this direct station. I was just thinking about 2 things, like the Indiana Jones archetype. That's just kind of classic, especially with Mars. If you're out doing some digging right in the early part of the month, or out
Mars
just
is
kind
the
of,
boulder falling, crashing down the mountain.
yeah, or like just that whole picture. And then the hero with 1,000 faces, that Joseph Campbell idea, where you don't even really know who you are. There's this morphology that can sometimes come with our journeys. And I think that could be, a good way to start the year. Well, the last thing I'll just say is that as it traverses into Cap, I do like the kind of clarity that may come with everything, that like it might be a little bit like, wow, 2024, this is nuts. And then now we settling in mid-January where it's like, okay, cool, this is what I'm going to do this year. This is how I want to attack the year, Mars and Capricorn. So just some of my thoughts there on it.
Actually, something sorry, this is kind of neither here nor there, or maybe it's somewhere here, but is 22 degrees Sag, is that the Asclepius star, Ras Al Hag, or?
I can find out in half a second. Let me just get up my main software that I use. And then here we go. Mercury is Ras Al Hag. Yes, 34 degree minutes from the stationary point of Mercury, Ras Al Hag.
I didn't catch that until just now, but yeah, I wonder about that.
What is it, Steph? Tell us what this means, the Asclepius star.
Well, I feel like in the past, whenever there's been something kind of around there, like there was something that kind of came forward in the field of medicine. I seem to remember, like in the early part of the pandemic, I think it might have been, there was something with that star around the time that the vaccines came out.
Yeah, an eclipse.
Am I wrong?
No, it was an eclipse there. It was an eclipse right there, solar eclipse. Okay.
That's interesting. I mean, but also because this Jupiter-Saturn sextile is kind of activating the Jupiter-Saturn cycle, which began in December 2020, which is when the vaccines came out, basically. So that I would not be too surprised to see themes around that, whether the vaccines themselves or the kind of technological systems that kind of were coming along with them. Wouldn't be too surprised to see those themes coming up with this long sextile between those planets, and that as that seems to kind of like send that message again.
Yeah, and to think that we're now, I think, in the second biggest surge of the whole pandemic, right? It's kind of like we're back to this thing that a lot of people thought was over, right?
Yeah, I've seen a lot more on Twitter about just people getting sick, and there's questions about, at least that's in the discourse more than it's been in a while for me here, as Mercury comes and gets close to stationing right on Ras Al Hag. I didn't mean to put you on a spot earlier, Steph. I hope, I want to say a little bit more. It's like Asclepius has the snake, and then he learns how to make the poison, the healing, and this is the constellation. It's like this healer that uses poison to kind of give people healing effectively. That's embedded in it. You see a lot of astrological magic that's done with that star being accentuated to cast talismans for healing. That's a common thing I've seen with Ras Al Hag. So I think the general theme of just health as a big theme as we start getting into early January, cold and flu season, COVID season, or COVID back. I mean, I've got my, I've been just drinking olive oil. I just drink it now in the morning, and I just love how that
Is that what they do in the Mediterranean?
Yeah, they do. Yeah. It feels good. It feels great. Just take shots of it. But whatever it is. When
I was in school, I did my study abroad in Madrid, and my my host mom, I think I came back with some sort of because I partied all night, right? I came back and I was like, I can't hear out of one ear, and she was like, here, put some olive oil in a cotton swab, microwave it, and stick it in your ear, and somehow it worked. It just it's like Windex in my big fat Greek wedding.
Okay, well, I want to push through here and just to kind of make sure we're kind of keeping a good pace here. One other final thing we wanted to talk about here was the ingress of Venus into Sagittarius, which will arrive. When is that? I think it's mid-month sometime, 20 January. It's even later than that. And how that does bring this the ingress of Venus out of into Sagittarius. Pardon me. Let me come back. Venus will ingress into Sagittarius today. Thank you, Venus. Yeah, you've gone through your little personal underworld there in Scorpio. Now we get Venus in Sag, but Venus will then hit that point and then enter Capricorn this month as well. And so that's just another Venusian layer here. Maybe this helps with some of the illness stuff that's going around, to have Venus come and then hit a Ras El Hague, at some point in January. It looks like that's, and then Ceres with Venus, and that's a very healing energy. These are two kind of benefic energies in a certain way, that by the 15th, 16th, they're right here, right near Ras El Hague, as they conjoin.
I was just going to add, I was following on Twitter X someone who kind of does like the forecasting for like, the wastewater trends and all of that. He was saying that the peak of this surge should be around January 10th, actually.
Okay, cool. So this will be like coming down from that here. And the peak of that surge, here's the 13th, Mercury's ingress right on the 14th. And so we kind of shift fully into this more Capricorn stellium with 3 traditionals in Capricorn. Okay, let's keep coming here. Dan, any final thoughts on that? I want to keep us hastily kind of pressing on here. Anything you feel like you want to share about this Mercury retrograde moment, this direct station, start the month, and then kind of trigger us?
No, I was just gonna say, the Mercury Capricorn ingress looks like a good moment to sort of really get your ducks in a row. And Mercury's going to be in its own Egyptian term when it enters Capricorn, so it's going to I think be quite noticeable that Mercury is suddenly going to be faring quite a bit better than it has. So yeah, I like that sort of middle of the month time for sort of, and we're going to talk about the Capricorn stellium in a bit, but yeah, getting things in order looks like very much on the menu from that middle of the month point.
Yeah, and Mars, and there's visibility with Mars just at this same moment. Mars is that 15-degree range from the sun, so that proxy we use for visibility on the 14th of January, just as Mercury's ingressing and getting strong in its own Egyptian term. Mercury ruled by that Mars by exaltation. This is a really beautiful combo, I think, for all kinds of information, action related to kind of long-term goals. I love it. Okay, let's shift out of this and let's come to the next point, which is the Jupiter-Saturn sextile applying all month. We've talked about it already a few times. Partile applying sextile starts on the 23rd of January. That means they're within a degree of each other. And then they begin separating finally on the 6th of February. I'll show that here in a second, but I just want to point out, everyone, 7 March 2023, Saturn comes to Pisces. 16 May 2023, Jupiter came to Taurus. And that kicked off, that ingress of Jupiter to Taurus, this sign-based sextile, which is define the era we're in as a sub-story of the longer Jupiter and Saturn cycle. And it's just so creative. Venus ruling Pisces by exaltation, Venus ruling Taurus by domicile. I think this is why the Barbie stuff and Oppenheimer stuff happened. Part of it was this, because Venus was so accentuated as it's stationed, but these two greater planets were depending on that Venus. And so Venus was like, giving its energy to a lot of the transiting sky at that time. But this is kind of the reason, I think, why Barbie was such a hit partially. And then they perfected the sextile in June. So think about that moment here as we got into December 2023. There's going to be a return to that as they get real close here. February 6th is the closest they'll get. And then finally, this will end in May when Jupiter is in Gemini. This is all over. This creative period is going to go away, and it becomes a mutable dynamism with information and unreality. Whereas now there's a lot more of that grounding creativity. And then we'll get those two squares in 2024. Where are you two at with this? What are you thinking? Are you as pumped up about this as me, or am I kind of out to sea here a little bit, pun intended?
No, I mean, I think having those two planets in that nice long sextile, those are planets that we've got obviously rule 4 signs, so that's a good third of your chart natally, and those two slow moving planets are suddenly kind of cooperating. And we've got kind of, the Jupiterian vision and the Saturnian practicality, although it's in this, Jupiter sign of Pisces. So I think, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of creative potential with this sextile, and we should really try and take advantage of it. I think I'll definitely be doing that myself, and I'd encourage other people to in January before things start to get kind of wild later on in the year.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it seems like one of those things you could easily overlook and take for granted while it's there. But then when we're going to have the Jupiter-Saturn squares with Jupiter in detriment, I feel like we're going to miss that.
Big time. And I'll tell you, like, this is part of sometimes how I do analysis of the sky. You know, you just go this, you take this kind of, where did they go? But this, when you look at just the traditionals, it really does become clear. Like, and you then like do this, you can see how it really does. They're not moving here. Everything else is moving fast. These two have been here for months and months, and so it really does kind of accentuate the nature of this extended feel good energy. I will just say this quickly, and we can press on. But when I looked at this transit before my year aheads for 2023, the kind of creativity you get with this, for example, in the mid 60s, it's Bob Dylan going electric and those kind of classic albums like Bringing It All Back Home. John Coltrane had some breakthrough free jazz records. You know, we talked about this in our year ahead forecast with Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus, bringing things like Orson Welles's Citizen Kane, all these kind of the arts, effectively. There was that movie, The Artist, that won the Oscar when Jupiter was in Taurus last time, as just a kind of sub example. But yeah, I mean, I just want to underscore for everybody, get your creative stuff on. I know I'm going to try to do a bunch of stuff during this too, and I'm just really pumped up.
Yeah, I'm I'm not super tapped into kind of where things are at in music scenes, movie scenes right now. It's not sort of obvious to me, exactly kind of where this creativity is like being outputted to at the moment. But I think there may be an element as well of kind of the creativity of the moment having to do with what people are starting to do with AI as well, and kind of it's got to be part of it. People are kind of reinventing how they make things, how they put things together. And I think that's probably, maybe a big part of what we might be seeing with this sextile between these two planets.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that now that Jupiter is stationing direct, we're getting that sort of like I feel like because it's stationing direct and it's heading directly towards that conjunction to Uranus now, like it feels palpable now, right? I don't know if you two have noticed anything. I feel like I had one instance, at least in my own private life, where I could kind of sense that this like Jupiter-Uranus thing is like, it's present in the field.
Oh, 100%. I'm so like, anyhow, yes. I've been really working on a lot of stuff I'm excited about. And I was talking to Dan before, actually. I was like, I think this has been the defining feature here of late December, early January, that stationary Jupiter, because it's been in the degree of its direct station for like a few days now, at least a week or more. It's really been the kind of the saving grace for everything. I feel like to have that punctuated, powerful Jupiter. And it's aspecting. I mean, you go to the clock now, it's aspecting Venus, and it has been. I mean, we've had this kind of hidden fixed sign power all month with these fixed moons getting this juice. And so I'm super pumped, and I feel it strongly, and I think about it every day. I look at it every night. I go up there and I see that Jupiter. You can see it at nighttime now, everybody. Just go up and look. It's the bright star that's hanging out on the opposite side of the sky where the sun set.
No, I gotta do that.
Okay, cool. Shall we push on? What do you two think? Any final thoughts on this one?
No, we should push on.
Okay, let's push on here. Yeah, I love to talk more about it. I have a few film recs that I can throw to you, Dan, about the creativity and where I think it's emergent, but we'll save that. Oppenheimer and Barbie, let's just throw that, because those both were released under this sextile, and they're both highly creative in their own ways. But there's many other examples. Just I wish I was more in tune with the hip music. We need to get someone on to do a whole show on that. Okay. Next point is the Capricorn stellium. Major feature of January 2024's astrology is Capricorn accentuated greatly. And I'm not going to walk through all of these, but I'm just going to say there's 4 planets, Sun, Mars, Mercury, Venus, and then 5 if you bring Pluto, that spend time in Capricorn in January 2024. and Pluto is going to leave Capricorn. Sun, Mercury leave Capricorn, and then Mars and Venus will leave Capricorn later. But this is the time to consider the Capricorn archetype, the energy of Capricorn, where it is in your chart, how you want to deploy Capricornian energy in a sector or in general. And I'll just say, for my kind of opening salvo, what I think is most important is Saturn and Mars are the primary rulers by domicile exaltation. What are Saturn and Mars? It's long-term, that's Saturn. It's things that have structure and long-term kind of visioning. And what is Mars? It's the workhorse. It's my favorite way to think about Mars lately in Capricorn. It's more localized work. So it's this perfect combination of like speed work with long-term planning that we have here. And it's super exciting. So get your work on, and is my kind of high level advice. And I'm sure you're already feeling it. Everybody's feeling this. The last thing I'll just quickly say, trine Jupiter. See, Capricorn, it's trining Jupiter, all of this Capricorn stuff. It's sextiling Saturn. We call this a minor grand trine, major feature of the month. So you have almost every planet is going to be engaged in this to support you with these endeavors with free-flowing supportive aspects. And so, yeah, take advantage of it.
Yeah, I was going to also say that there were like a couple of weeks that kind of stood out to me this month where it's like Mercury enters Capricorn and then starts applying to that trine to Jupiter. So I'm just like, yeah, if there's anything that you're like planning, if you're trying to like book tickets, book reservations, like I feel like that week in particular really stands out as a good time to set those plans in motion. And then Venus enters Capricorn and starts applying to Jupiter the last week of the month too. So there's also like this really kind of nice energy that's building there too.
Yeah, and that looks like it's 28 January where Venus will perfect the trine to Jupiter. And it's worth kind of walking through. I think just visually you can see this with this minor grand trine, everyone. So Sun, you can see it here. This is what we're talking about when we talk about a minor grand trine. It's two sextiles. Saturn's the pivot, and then the trine that encloses it. It's like a little flat hat here. And so we had the Sun yesterday or 2 days ago. It did its bit to trigger the Saturn-Jupiter sextile. The creativity we just talked about. It's these faster moving planets triggering it. And then just watch. I'll do it kind of manually here. But then Mars comes with the moon, right, with that new moon that we're going to talk about. Mars is triggering the minor grand trine on 11 January, roughly. You can see it there. Mercury enters, triggers the minor grand trine on 18 January, roughly. And then Venus comes to close the month with the final minor grand trine trigger. This one might be the most auspiciously potent because you have Venus, the benefic, involved. It's double benefics and Saturn.
Well, that's also right when we have that Mercury-Mars thing, square the nodes, too.
Okay.
Should be interesting.
Should be, maybe some of that goodness gets eclipsed away. But,
yeah, that's an interesting feature, right? Because you've got these planets kind of showing up at the bendings at the same time as what looks like kind of quite nice constructive astrology. So there's good stuff going on, but there's this sort of element of chaos, disturbance that you get at that point.
I almost wonder if maybe because I feel like Mercury and Mars both do Mars obviously, but Mercury also does relatively well in Capricorn. It makes me think of like that notion of like decide is to like cut something off, right? And so maybe this is like a moment where we take some sort of decisive action and like say no to this thing so we can say yes to this thing, right? And then it has that kind of benefic quality too. So I'm wondering if like maybe this moment isn't that rough around the edges, or it could be. I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking just the one thing that came to mind was like Steve Jobs. I don't know, this idea of like building here for like long term, because his whole thing was like seeing the future, and like you're able to kind of then give people what they don't even know they want. And so there's some kind of eclipse thing with, we'd have to look at the history of his chart and Apple and the eclipses and all of it. I know that at least with the Pisces series of eclipses, the iPhone emerges, and that felt kind of Piscean in a way. I know that the node isn't here and there's no eclipses right around this time in January, but there's still Saturn and Pisces. And it's like the minor grand trine with long-term visioning. This is that like psychedelic kind of vision work that is a huge component of all of this astrology we're describing. That's why I'm so pumped up about it. Is this the Piscean dreams, right, made real as you have this very supportive flow, and even Taurus energy. This is not weak energy. I mean, this is like staying with the steadfast bull of the commitment, and then staying in that work mode. So it's just so beautiful here, and it's every element. This is the thing about a minor grand trine. You get cardinal, you get fixed, and you get mutable. And so there's this kind of very elegant blend.
Yeah, I haven't gone through elections for that month, like in depth really, but you'd suspect that there might be some quite nice ones for building things coming, with those different minor grand trines that are configured to Jupiter and Saturn. It looks like a really good time to start things, and obviously you'd want to drill down and make sure you've got the moon in the right place and all that kind of thing. But there's a lot of potential there. It's also interesting just though seeing all this. I mean, this big Capricorn pileup, and given some of the themes that are kind of in the zeitgeist at the moment, the themes of the establishment, of the current order, and so on, I think are all likely to be triggered. We were talking a little bit about the whole Epstein thing, and so on a mundane level, Capricorn, it is the establishment, the order, and there's a lot there. And one of the last times that we saw a big Capricorn pileup was the pandemic 2020 pileup. So you kind of see that there's a potential for sort of that theme to be reactivated in some ways, I think, again.
Yeah, and even the healing with that Ross L. Haig conjunction with Ceres Venus here. Maybe there's just breakthroughs and getting better. I hate to say that because we know that the healthcare system in a lot of the world is pretty corrupt, but I don't, just try to stay optimistic with, maybe some healing can emerge here for folks, especially, with Venus, Ceres on Ross L. Haig. I just come back to that. Even if this is like pandemic triggers with the Capricorn triggering Saturn, Pluto's conjunction, what was that, 22nd degree, I think, or the 22 degrees.
And I mean, on a personal level, I like this Capricorn stuff. I think, given if we're thinking about mundane stuff again, what's going on in the world, an exalted Mars is maybe not something you particularly want to see at times like this. We all know what's happening, and suddenly Mars, the planet of war, is raised up.
Right.
It's Lord of the Manor, and so on at that level, kind of that gives me pause a little bit. There's different ways to see this, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like what you were saying in the beginning, SJ, about how Mars has kind of been part of like the main narrative now since it's been in Libra and then Scorpio and then with the square, but then that doesn't stop when it becomes exalted, right? I feel like it's just a continuation of that.
Yeah, and just to say, I think this comes next month, but Mars at the south bending of the lunar nodes, that will actually happens at the end of the month. This is something to consider, everyone, because Mars conjoining the south node triggered October 7th events. And now we have Mars squaring the lunar nodes at that south bending. It really is by the way, the bendings, the south one, they'll say this is more like the south node. Okay, so you might bring in Ketuian signatures here. It's like a return to that Ketuian moment. I would be really watching 28 January in that area, in that part of the world. I hate to even bring it up, frankly, because you just want to pray for peace and envision peace, but we have to, as astrologers, at least note the trigger. And maybe Venus will help, maybe this is going to kind of cool this off, or a little bit more unity here with Venus entering Capricorn, Venus, a ruler of Capricorn by triplicity. Maybe that's something that can be useful here. We're going to talk in a second about Pluto and Aquarius and the squares, but I think this has to do with the Pluto and Aquarius story. If that situation does accelerate in ways we don't want to see. What will that do with the world order, and how Pluto and Aquarius may be changing the world order this month? Why don't we push into that if you guys want to, and that way we can keep this moving forward. Is that okay? Anything else you really want to talk about here with the Capricorn energy this month? Or can we, there's the new moon, maybe we can just, it will elide very well into that new moon conversation. And I think with this, we can just kind of keep it going here. I don't really have much more to say on this new moon, except that, everything we've already talked about, the bendings we brought in already. I think that's the main thing we wanted to add this to the conversation this month, was to just let everybody know, listen, you've got a new moon right at the south bending partile squaring. And so all of those eclipse stories get a major trigger. I would just say, go ahead.
It's a very close trine to Uranus there. So,
yeah,
it's sort of at the bendings, and it's trining Uranus with, the ruler Mars. It's, there's this sort of strange disconnect between a certain sort of, there's that Capricornian reliability and solidness, and yet there's some sense of the new or disruption and so on, but bringing something sort of radical into being would not surprise me too much around that time.
Yeah, I mean, just in the process of, preparing, charts and calendars for some of my clients, the vibe that I'm getting is that it feels like some of these things that we've been thinking about doing for a while, right? Like we've been kind of vaguely planning on like a move or like some other big life change. It seems like all of those things that are just kind of like abstract at the moment become very real in January, right? It's like suddenly it's just like, all right, it's time to like make the choice and like, pivot. That's what it feels like.
And I would just encourage everyone. I mean, this October eclipse season that we just went through, I don't know how it was for everyone else out there, but it was pretty intense, especially for cardinal signs and cardinal heavy energy at a whole number of levels. And even the early one in April 2023, that first one in Aries, that just kicked up a story. And now we get a new moon that's now in the cardinal axis. The nodes are settled in the cardinal axis. We will have, we're coming into that eclipse season in 2024 where you have both eclipses in the cardinal axis, the only one of that cycle. I do feel like we may be being drawn in here deeper into those eclipse stories. So review your cardinal axis, everyone, and what happened with your eclipse story in 2023, because this is going to ping that and alter that. And look, it could be exciting. I like the nodes as revealers and as accelerators of purpose. And so let's hold out for some of that too, that maybe, the love affair continues or whatever it's going to be in your world. I think that could happen here for sure. Pluto anoretic is a big deal. I think by this time this month, we're really feeling into Pluto. I think everybody will be talking about Pluto. It's too close to Pluto. And then the sun gets close. Like we're into that story now, kind of fully by this point, here real soon. I feel it already. I just want to talk about Pluto all day. I want to wake up, tweet about it, 5 tweets a day.
Yeah,
but I know
it's interesting that this is the month that Pluto goes back into Aquarius, and we have this new moon that's kind of saying which shit's going to go down, and then we're kind of getting that said by the lunation, and then the outer planet is saying exactly the same thing.
Well, another thing to remember too is that we like for most of like the last half of 2023, Pluto was squaring the nodes, right?
Yeah.
So whatever that story was about, I feel like the new moon square the nodes could be punctuating that right as Pluto is getting ready to change signs.
Yeah, for sure. And it was, let's go back to just 7 October. I mean, I know this was a major trigger in 2023 looking back. I mean, this day, these events have triggered an acceleration of this kind of geopolitical shakeup in a major, major way. And you can just look at this chart. It was Mars with the South Node squaring Pluto, as you mentioned, Steph, and Mars square Pluto very, very close. And it's undeniable that you get to this new moon And we're triggering some of these same degrees pretty closely in some of these same placements. So geopolitically, high interest here, and that situation's still ongoing. I mean, that's the sad part about it. We are all like, oh, it's just going to be short. Let's hope it goes away. Let's hope it goes away. But this is being brought into 2024. I mean, it's right at the front of the table, front burner on the oven. And so to see this, yeah, it's a little bit disconcerting and kind of sort of heavy. You know, Pluto's heavy. This is real and heavy and deep and profound. And I do think you're wise to point out, Dan, that these reverberations will continue here. And when Pluto ingresses right here with the sun, we talked about Pluto anaretic already on the 19th, and Cazimi, the sun. If you have outer planet Cazimis, I know that's a debate all three of us have had before, but 20 January, the sun enters Aquarius, and then Pluto enters Aquarius on the 21st, that little pocket, like 19, 20, 21. By this time, how loud do you think this ingress is going to be? And I'm deliberately shifting us there, if you're okay with that, because that's the next point on the slide. Why don't we just go there now, if you're okay with that? What are you? How loud is this going to be, you two? I mean, this could be really loud, right? I mean,
I think you'd have to put your money on loud, right? I mean, any day you would expect a Pluto ingress to be noticeable, probably, but with the sun there, it's kind of undeniable, isn't it? The light is being shined on this ingress. So I'd be amazed if we didn't see some very Pluto-Aquarian stuff in the headlines around that day.
Yeah, and the other thing that stood out to me about this moment is how we get the moon in Gemini at the same time, right? And so it's really kind of emphasizing that trine that I think is going to be so important over the next couple of years as Jupiter gets there and then Uranus gets there, right?
Yeah, very insightful point. I mean, this could be a snapshot few days of showing us our future. And that's how these things can really do that. I mean, Dan and I had a whole video you can check out where we just said, what is the Pluto and Aquarius period, which was March through June, roughly 2023. We went through all the stories we thought were important thematically, and it was very rich with that. And so just to look at that lunar transit stuff of like, and here I'm going to go back to solar fire in a second, but this really does capture the outer planet astrology of the next few years, right in this little kind of sub snapshot, fractal, you might say, fractal of meaning. So I'm going to be paying attention for sure to that weekend. Real quick here, I just have the outer dates. Just know Pluto in Aquarius ends finally in 2044. So we're buckling up for about a 20-year transit here, just over 20 years. And just to say, just for completeness sake in this video, what is Pluto in Aquarius? Well, it's transformation through destruction, right? What small takes over and kind of destroys and then emerges as the dominant force. We see things like a decentralization, where what was the center doesn't hold, it gets rejuvenated or reformulated. I think this is where some of the modern assignations to Aquarius as the egalitarian and the humane, this can really come in here when you look at the history of Pluto and Aquarius as showing us how, like, you won't have one power structure that was maybe authoritarian. Capricorn has to reinvent itself and have new rule sets that are a little bit more friendly for everyone, at least in some sense. And so, this is always the question I was thinking, what is that for our time? And I do think that technology, Aquarian being a technological sign as well, is going to play a major role. I mean, I've said this for a while now, but just the knowledge in this that everybody has at your fingertips at all times. It's so profound. I mean, you can make anything you want, you can learn how to do anything you want, and then you can learn how to actually do it in reality. And so I think that this will continue to spread power all over the world. And of course, we'll have more technological regimes with currency and with the world order and with IDs and central bank digital currencies and all that stuff. We've covered it at length in many videos, but it's just worth kind of laying a little bit of that out here, because this is the kind of stuff I'll be looking for right as this ingress happens. These are the kind of stories I'm going to be keyed in on. And the one thing I'll just point out here, OpenAI was sued by the New York Times. Did you guys see that recently?
Yeah.
So they're for copyright infringement, and so that lawsuit is going to be interesting, just to see if they settle or if there's other lawsuits, or how is AI going to be put in check by like older legal regimes or older Capricornian styles of the world of legal orders that then are going to have to be reinvented. And that stuff, I'm telling you, it's not an easy case. Some of the things you've looked at on Twitter might make it seem like it's open and shut, but when you go into how AI reproduced those articles, it didn't read the articles, right? It did it in another way. And so it's like some novel legal theories are in play here. I think some of that will be setting the tone for the next 20 years. I'll be looking into stories like that, or that story in particular. Any thoughts, just high level here, you two, on this, as this then begins here again for 10 months or whatever in 2024?
And I do remember, it was sort of surreal looking at the front page of what the newspaper. I usually look at the Guardian. It's it's free to access. It's not behind a paywall, and just the tone of the stories in that previous Pluto and Aquarius period, the themes, they were just notably different. All of the AI stuff was suddenly really up there. There was, remember all this stuff with David Grush and these sort of UFO kind of claims and stories that are going around. That was suddenly up there. We had these kind of balloons and spy balloons and stuff and all that kind of thing that was going down. And then all of the BRICS news that we've talked about as well. It's interesting. Just we're looking at this kind of whole situation with global trade in the Suez Canal. What's that kind of setting up? Is that maybe setting up sort of proposals for like alternative arrangements for global trade and things of that kind? Especially with the sun there at that ingress, I'm really expecting things to just sort of look quite different on that day. I'd also encourage all viewers as well, just to if you know your own chart and if you use whole sign houses, which house Aquarius is, just pay kind of close attention to what's going on around the time of that ingress, and if you know what part of your life that house represents, just try and kind of keep an eye open. Is there anything, what happens on that day? Does anything shift? And think back to what shifted during the last period as well, because the fact that we get the sun's light there, it's kind of helpful to shine a light on what's coming, both for the world and for us.
It's like the movie Arrival or something. On that day,
I just saw quickly as an interlude this movie. It's called Dream Story, I think. It's with the new Nick Cage movie. And what starts happening is like almost simultaneously, the whole world starts dreaming about him, and he just shows up in the dreams. That's the premise of the film. So it's some kind of like otherworldly arrival of this knowledge of, in this case, it's how we're all interconnected into the dream realm, and it kind of opens up whole new ways for humans to communicate. AGI, this is the last thing, two quick points and then we can move, but like AGI, as AI is advancing, I'm wondering about new models that might be released around this time. I just saw an amazing Microsoft model that you just show a picture, and it was like showing a guy with a mouth agape, just that picture. And then they animated it perfectly. And it was just like one short voice clip. And it was like these perfect animations of a digital avatar. So some breakthroughs in that just today. I mean, these breakthroughs are happening every week. And I think it's part of the Saturn and Pisces moment, as well as Dan was saying earlier, and the sextile with Saturn and Jupiter. But then Pluto and Aquarius is going to come. And I think we could see whole new levels of this stuff. And then finally, I'll just say the Pluto and Aquarius 2024 shift, Bitcoin specifically is going to have a big year this year. I didn't mean big just in terms of the event called the halving. But right here in January, there may be approval of some ETFs where Wall Street and the more traditional finance world may be embracing Bitcoin right here in January 2024, unlike anything we've seen before. And that would fit these themes, right? A decentralized network of digitization that then might take on more prominence here. And Bitcoin's quite Plutonian because it was nothing. I mean, I remember when it came out, it was no one, it was just some joke. And then it slowly has become this thing that may become more dominant now as Pluto's going to enter Aquarius. So those are two stories I'm looking at. But
And
that fit
Bitcoin's
January.
Sorry to jump in, SJ, but Bitcoin is also something that's mined as well. It's not so literal, but just as Pluto represents wealth, those things that we mine from the earth. Bitcoin is Plutonian in that sense too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Something else. Oh, sorry. Keep going.
Just say quickly, it's Earth air because it's Earth because you need energy. So that's all the age of Earth, Jupiter and Saturn, 19th century, 20th century. So Bitcoin consumes energy, but it's air because it's computer computation to solve algorithmic problems. And so it's a kind of an elegant Capricorn Aquarius story and it came with Pluto and Aquarius, or with Pluto and Capricorn in 2009. And now it will, continue that Saturn ruled sign story. So yeah, definitely on the radar. Steph, go ahead. Yeah.
No, just something else I was thinking about is that I remember all the way back in 2009 reading this article about Ray Kurzweil, the futurist. Do you guys know who he is? Yeah. And he was the one who predicted, I think, when a computer would be able to beat a human in chess. And he specifically said that he thought 2024 would be the year that we got the singularity. And I remember years ago, when I was thinking about Pluto in Aquarius enters in 2024, and that kind of lines up with this timeline that he prescribed. And I remember being wow, what is 2024 going to be like? And what is the singularity really? What is that going to be?
It's interesting with Kurzweil, just because I know in 2019, I did kind of a deep dive. He was actually saying 2044 by then. I know he shifted this date around a lot.
Wow.
But then in the last 4 years, he's moved it up, at least that date. He's now moved back to 2029. So it's all, when I first read about it 4 or 5 years ago, I kind of deep dive when I was studying this. I was it'll be Pluto and Aquarius, where by the time we're over, at least it lined up at that point. But now it's maybe mid-transit, and maybe it's Jupiter-Saturn opposition. That can often be an important moment, the announcement of Osama bin Laden's, that whole thing that happened at the opposition, and the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter in 2001 or 2000 triggers war on terror. And so there's these kind of puncture, so I'm wondering, anyhow, just a few thoughts on that stuff. I mean, people can go, he's all over the place. So I'm sure, I'm not saying anyone's right or wrong here. I think he's the one who's a little bit confused, actually, but it fits with this symbolism, certainly. No doubt. Okay. Should we press on? There's one more point, and then we're going to do a Q&A here for those that want to hold over. Are you two ready? I think we've covered that plenty. There's so many videos out there on it. You all, the main thing is just look, it's the sun with Pluto during the ingress. It's the moon trining, and that solar lunal activation might give us unique abilities to check in here. Actually, one other thing I just want to point out, and I'm going to show you on the other document on my software. We'll go into this for the February forecast, but it's the Mars in February. Mars and Venus are going to conjoin pretty close to Pluto, and so look for that to also bring in a major Pluto and Aquarius thing. We'll talk about it later for sure. I don't even know why I jumped ahead. I just felt like I wanted to say that. Maybe with January, what's important is to know that they're getting close, Mars and Venus here, and they're kind of starting to mix now. And then they're going to mix with Pluto in Aquarius in February. And so that's something just to keep on your radar here late in the month, as Aquarius is accentuated with Pluto and the sun, and then Jupiter, and then Mars and Venus come together. There's some kind of, I think, continuation here, a combination of those 4 planets. So sorry to jump ahead, you two. I'm thinking that was probably best left for February's forecast, but I couldn't help myself there.
Yeah, just some other thing, because there is, of course, Bitcoin is a big theme, but the other element is other kinds of monetary schemes like CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, UBI, universal basic income. These, I think there was definitely an uptick in news about UBI during the last Pluto in Aquarius activation. We have Jupiter in Taurus. We have Saturn in Pisces, and so the Pluto and the Sun. I mean, the Sun can have to do with the governments and with the center as well. So I'm definitely also keeping my eye on new monetary systems and schemes of that kind that aren't just coming from the sort of decentralized world of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I've seen news about that just today. I was looking, and there was someone was talking about, it's called Fed Now, which is the Federal Reserve's ability. They're kind of setting up a system where it can go exactly into wallets that directly from the Federal Reserve. I mean, this has been a scheme that's been contemplated for a while, but I think that's coming online more fully potentially in 2024. And then it was also looking at some of the technology in Ukraine where they were airdropping USDC through that company Circle, which is the creator of that stable coin. And those are like old Wall Street people involved in that. And then they were converting it and through MoneyGram so they could go and get their local currency through those airdrops as a way to give aid to people in Ukraine that needed it. So yeah, all of that stuff seems like it's set to kind of, I mean, these are the basket of stories that I think are good to have in mind, certainly. Okay, let's push on, you two. Is that okay? And I think the final event is that Uranus station. Uranus is direct station, and I know Dan, you were keen on this and kind of. Oh, we have a sub slide about the full moon in Leo. All I'll say with this is that it's square. It's the full moon in Leo here is opposite Pluto in Aquarius. You see that, and this is another event that is going to punctuate that 20 January moment and 21 where they both ingress. And then you get a full moon pretty quickly after that, squaring Jupiter in Taurus. And your whole conversation there, Dan, about like value, you might assign that to Taurus, like how we value things. And you have these innovations and expansions. This is like UBI potentially, Jupiter and Uranus and Taurus, but it's the angularity with Pluto and Aquarius that very much brings in, I think, just to say, that's my one comment about like this sub-transit is, look for just a solar-lunar accentuation of everything we just talked about right out of the gate, 25 January.
Yeah, I mean, this full moon looks dramatic, to say the least.
Dramatic?
Dramatic, yeah.
Okay, I was going to say traumatic. I was like, oh.
Hopefully not that, no.
Okay. Where do you, is it the outer planet stuff mainly, or? I
mean, I think it's so the moon in Leo, full moon opposing Sun and Pluto and Jupiter, right? It feels kind of like stark revelation, right? It's like it's happening so soon after that ingress too, that it just seems like it's like revelation on top of revelation with the Cazimi followed by the full moon, right? I think that those first couple of days should be revealing.
For sure, agree. Okay, let's press on. And this is the final point for the forecast this month, and it's Uranus's direct station, 19 degrees, 5 degree minutes Taurus on 27 January at 7:35 UTC. You can see the chart here. All I've got with this, I just wanted to add a little bit about the dance of Uranus over the next little period, because there's only 2 more direct stations, or 3 more direct stations in Taurus. So this is the second to last, or no, the third to last. And so we're kind of winding down all of Jupiter and Taurus. And I was just thinking about, like, when I saw this as a point and I was looking at this, like, what has this whole transit been? It's like 2018 through 2025. And like, what I was thinking, what are the Jupiter and Taurus, what are the Uranus and Taurus stories? I mean, they should be pretty clear by now, right? We've been in it long enough. What's the big thing that is Uranus and Taurus? And the only thing I could really come up with was all of the digital restructuring. I know this is an earth sign, so it's not an air sign. It's not really, but Uranus is the technology. That's the natural signification of Uranus. And so it's acting through like our like supply chains and the earth that we live in and all of that stuff. And, I even think about my own world of like how tech, like I'm traveling all over the world. Like, like my Taurus, my daily structure of life and kind of flow is so technological at this point. And this is all the stuff around COVID, the COVID years, the Zoom culture. That's to me a big part of Uranus and Taurus. And that's the main thing I could think of, but you two might have others. Anyhow, you might be able to talk about this higher level, like what's Uranus and Taurus been, but just know that's where I went with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, similar places. We've seen a lot of disruption to money. All the inflation and stuff. There's other factors that you can put that down to, but I think Uranus in that sign of wealth as well has got to speak a bit to that. We've had quite a bit of crazy weather. That's not completely new, but I think it's fair to say that there's been quite a bit more of that. All the kind of fires, freak weather in various parts of the world. New systems for trade, but then disruption to the old trading systems. It's all kind of part of the same picture of kind of like the sort of mechanisms of wealth and materialism are sort of being jolted around and flipped upside down. I think we've seen a fair bit of that.
Yeah, I was going to say that I think that especially was driven home during the Saturn-Uranus squares, right? There was like, from that period of time, I seem to remember there being like a lot of supply chain disruption. And what was the other thing? Oh yeah, the weather thing that you mentioned. It was, I think that was especially pronounced during the Saturn-Uranus squares, because I seem to remember every time that aspect kind of went close to being exact, there was some sort of like climate or weather-related catastrophe.
And this was the inflation stuff that the raising of the interest rates by the Federal Reserve. It was all of 2022 that the money that was injected during COVID. The consequences of that was trying to kill that inflation by raising rates quite fast, and that was part of, I think, what you were getting at, Dan, and supply chain, because wasn't that the big story, right? It was the inflation. It was breaking the supply chain because people couldn't buy like lumber to build a house. And the eggs, remember that? The eggs, the egg prices, no one could buy eggs, or people were buying crates of eggs and making billions of dollars because they just had these crates, and stuff.
Right. I mean, it also went, it really went all the way back to the start of COVID. It started with toilet paper, and then it just kind of went from there.
Who could forget the toilet paper?
Yeah. And that's Taurean, right? The comfort. We need that toilet paper to feel safe in our homes and to feel comfortable. And I mean, it's the whole lunar component of Taurus, I think, comes in there. I was just going to quickly say, you mentioned this earlier, Steph. We're really setting up now. When you get to this direct station of Uranus, and what is it, 27 Jan, 2024. I mean, the next stop here with this Taurus story, Jupiter's now direct. It's out of its degree of its direct station. It's moving. It's coming for Uranus in April. And now this is direct. And so there's a lot of forward momentum here for, I think, whatever those events are going to be in April. And we may see a preview of those April events here at the end of the month as Uranus is punctuated. And all I was going to say about it was, we talked about in our forecast a couple of examples of that. I won't deliver them here again, but people can go watch that. It's exciting, Think about your whole sign house where Taurus is, and now Jupiter. This final push through this year with Uranus and Jupiter. What are they going to do? What is the opportunity first half 2024 in your Taurus whole sign house? With this combination of innovation, lightning flashes of innovation, Prometheus delivering fire to you, right? And then Jupiter, the revelations and the truth and the wisdom and the abundance. You can't forget that keyword that everybody loves to hate for Jupiter, right? The abundance that it can bring. So there it is. I mean, I think we're getting deeper into that by the end of the month.
Yeah. And I think we also kind of called out that with that Uranus station, it was also emphasizing the Mercury-Mars that's happening right around that time, because it's forming a trine, right? Yeah. In addition to being at the bendings.
Yes.
So it just seems to be this kind of like really kind of like disruptive moment, right? Where something in the order just kind of, I don't want to say breaks, but adjusts for sure.
Yeah, it's all happening in it's in earth signs as well. So there's it's these sort of things that the tangible things that we rely on. Again, you probably got to think, there's Capricorn and Taurus involved. Money and banking are also themes that maybe come to mind.
I mean, there's talk about bullish breakouts and kind of another, blow off tops here in the market because of the Fed now not raising rates, right? They've paused. And so what if a lot of commentators have pointed out that Jupiter and Uranus together have timed tops in things like Bitcoin or other asset classes. And so, I mean, this could be exuberance. This could be like a nodal, irrational kind of exuberance. I like this chart because of the the Mars Mercury. I really love that. Actually, I just love their combination, and that it's so nodal. Maybe this is some kind of exuberance that just goes out of control here in the first part of the year, and we're sort of kicking that off here in earnest. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen. What should we shift out of here? Any final thoughts on anything? You two, with the astrology of this month, or with that transit, would you like to say some closing thoughts here on anything at all? Where are you at?
I feel like there's always more I could say, but we're going on like an hour and a half now, so okay. This is probably enough.
Okay. And there will be a Q&A here if you want to stick around, but let's just wind down here. Dan, final thoughts for you? Anything that you feel compelled to share?
I don't have too much more to add, really. I quite like the month, particularly on a personal basis for individuals. I think there's a lot of potential there. I think on a mundane level, it might not be the kind of month we're all celebrating necessarily, but certainly it's a good start to the year for us to get stuck into things.
Isn't that frequently the case, though, that like what looks good for the individual doesn't really look great on a mundane level?
Yeah. I mean, Mars on a mundane level at a time like this is not probably not our favorite fellow in the sky at the moment. But from a personal level, Mars can be just getting things done and putting things into action or solving problems, and there's always that kind of dichotomy between the ways you can kind of see the planets personally and on a mundane level.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think I was saying maybe the best month of the year. I actually think it is probably the best month of astrology this year, for all those minor grand trines and the free flowing aspects between planets. Everything's direct after Mercury station's direct. So the rest of the year, there's too many, we don't quite get this elegant support that we're going to have here in the first month of the year. Not that there's not wonderful pockets that we'll be breaking down as we go. But okay, let's just wind this down. Dan Waits, astrology.com. This is Dan's website, a beautiful site here. You can schedule consultations with Dan. Dan, anything to update on with your consultation schedule, or anything else you want to say? What's going on in your world?
I'm still taking bookings. I've got a few slots left at the end of January. I am probably going to be taking some time off consultations for a while. I've got some creative projects that I want to get going, and so I need to clear out some space. So I probably will take some time off consultations. So if people have been wanting to book with me, then it's a good time to get in while there are still slots.
You're doing it in 2024.
Doing it in 2024. That's the plan.
Yeah.
That cardinal activation. It's wonderful. Okay. Steph, I love your site. It's ladykazemi.com. And I just love that image. I just love that good work on that design. Beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I probably need to get new pictures taken. But anyway, yeah. I took December off from consultation, so I'm getting back into it this month. I still have a couple of spots left in January. So if you're looking for a year ahead or whatever it may be, I'm here.
Beautiful, beautiful. And here I am. You can head to my site, click here to schedule a reading. There's slots available into the future, certainly there. But check out this. I'm so proud of this graphic. I share it a lot on X Twitter, but this is always updated where you'll have the nice, planets and signs, and then you have the tarot correspondences right below that. But I love that fire trine we've got going on right now. Sag, Leo moon to the Sag placements, kind of cool energy.
So that's it for this January 2024 forecast episode. As I said, we will be back with a forecast for February in the usual style. And if you enjoyed this episode and you are intrigued by what we were saying about Pluto in Aquarius, then I suggest you watch this episode in which SJ and I analyzed what happened earlier in 2023 when Pluto was in Aquarius, and use that to figure out what we think's coming over this next 20 years of this very important transit. Thanks, and see you next time.